Got you. I know exactly what I have to say. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in again. Welcome to another episode of The Context Window, podcast dedicated to all things AI, the hype, what it might be, what it is, what it will be, and maybe even a little bit of myth busting. Today, we have two guests in the house, Will Iverson to my left and Justin Graham to my right. Justin and I are currently part of Sirrus 7, and Will and I had the, I would say, extreme fortune of having been business partners for a number of years. The, I guess, backstory in all this too is that we've worked together in some capacity since 2012 and 2010 respectively. Check my math on that. Yep. Fact check it, guys.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
Like,
sounds about right.
A couple of years ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Time flip.
Yeah. And it's only 2025.
Right.
And so today's episode is going to be focused on a little bit of the hype, a little bit of from some experts. This is going to be a little bit more techy than the last one that we did, and maybe not as technical as some of the ones we do in the future, but it's going to be fun either way. So you guys ready to jump in?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Like anything, I've prepared one question. It's not a firebomb. It's just something that's going to kind of like spark the juices a little bit. And so rather than saying, I'd like you to take one side or you to take one side, let's just flow the opinions on when will, if it will. So rephrase the question. Will AI become a sentient thing? And if so, when? Will, you're the guest, so you go first.
Yeah, I think just to set context on the background. So, we worked together for a long time. Obviously, my background's in the tech side, but my actual major in school is political science. Mm-hmm. So what that means is whenever we're thinking about some new technology or approach or what have you, like we used to do, like back in the day, we were mostly talking about Agile or CI or CD. Mm-hmm. So nowadays it's AI and LLMs. That's the thing that we're talking about. So like a question like, is it going to be intelligent, sentient? Is that a technical question or is that a like social or cultural question?
Says the engineer, right?
Right. Because I think that
how does it land with you? The question, you can make it whatever you want. There's no wrong answer.
Well, and the reason I kind of go there is like, so if you talk in like the world of, philosophy, right? They have been arguing in that space. What does it even mean to be intelligent for thousands of years, right? Is it golems? Is it animated entities? Like where does intelligence come from? How would you even know it? If you said Alan Turing from the Turing test, he would have said the test for it is you put two entities behind a curtain, and if you can't tell talking to them which is human or which is not, then that's how you know if you cracked intelligence. Mm-hmm. So that was shattered like 10.
Okay, good. I'm glad you brought that up because the answer is yes.
So the answer is yes. So, but then what happens is as humans, because we don't understand ourselves very well, because we take so much for granted. Like if I just want to walk across the room, I stand up and I walk across the room. So why is it so hard for a robot to do that? And the same thing I think is true with all this conversation around AI, is that a lot of it isn't a technical problem. It's not a question of what achievement do we hit. It's when do humans recognize it, and then that next step becomes harder and harder to hit. And there's a long list of tech. Like this is from the hype cycle. It's like, do you remember the Segway?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. So the Segway, we were supposed to all be building.
Niles went in Fraser everywhere.
Yeah. So when the Segway first was coming out, people were saying we're going to rebuild our cities around Segways.
Yeah.
Like we're going to change it. I've been tracking on VR for a long time. I don't know if you remember, I got the dev kit for Oculus and brought that into the office. This was over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, oh my gosh, we're going to live in the metaverse or in the VR space, what have you. But we don't. So I have a VR headset and I mostly use it to work out, which is pretty cool. It's got like a boxing program. I like it. It's fun. I'm glad I bought it. It was a couple $100 for the headset. But like if you said to me, I'm going to live in this thing.
Yeah.
Right. So for AI, to me, it's like the problem is that you have a lot of the people who have vested economic interests in selling that hype version. They want you to think this is going to be fully intelligent, replace workers, etc., because that's also partly how they justify their valuations. If you use it every day, which we all do, like we go into work, we're like, so for technical purposes, you realize that like the gap between, I have an idea for a thing and that producing something working, and then do you massage it? It's so far, right? Mm-hmm. So you have the trivial example, which is I could fire, like I put ChatGPT on the table right now, kick on voice mode, and we talk to it, and it would create the feeling that I'm talking to something intelligent. Mm-hmm. Is that intelligence? I don't know. Because is that saying something more about me and how I think of intelligence? Than
are you willing to accept it, maybe? Right?
Yeah.
Or its definition.
Yeah. And so I actually don't, I think that when I'm a sci-fi nerd.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
I keep coming back to the most realistic depiction in fiction of where I think this stuff is going is actually probably, weirdly enough, Star Wars. Like, they have robots, but they're kind of janky. Like, and certainly don't, like you do in Star Wars, there's this sense that people have that they're the robots, they can give them tasks, they can do stuff, and occasionally you'll see sort of almost like a pet family relationship develop, but they never treat them as people. It doesn't mean that they're not huge. I presume that's part of what lets them do things like build like freaking Death Stars and all that, is because they have access to the robots. But, does that represent this fundamental transformation of like human life, and what does that imply? I don't know. Does the internet count as that? I don't know. Like,
it could.
Is it?
Yeah, like I said, there's no wrong answer. There's no wrong.
What do you think?
What about you, Justin? Same question.
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought up the Turing test, because we obviously have blown past that. And so where it goes to for me is actually how do we actually measure sentience? And we got a mic moving.
Yeah, you're good.
So how do we actually do the measurement, and do we need to reclassify the measurement?
Yeah.
There's a study that was done recently that I thought was really interesting around preservation of life, and whether or not LLMs and AI models are actually trying to be self-preserve, and they actually will lie and cheat and actually try and circumnavigate to preserve themselves and not get shut down. So under duress, they seem to be at least programmed. If we go technical, the programming seems to be self-aware.
Right.
And so where my mind goes is I don't know that it's as important for historical tests. I think the definition is slowly changing, and I don't think we have a good definition of what sentience is yet.
So like if I play a video game, right, and let's say I'm playing a game like GTA or whatever, and there's little tunes in the game, and they run around, and they have pretty simple behavior trees, so nobody technically would say that they're intelligent.
Right.
But if I like pull out a gun in GTA and I start shooting it, the little AIs will scream, they'll run away, they'll cower, they'll try to hide, they'll even say like, don't kill me or whatever, right? Does that mean that the NPCs in GTA are intelligent?
Well, and that's a great question. From a programming standpoint, obviously not, right? They're super simple. We've programmed them to respond in that way to acts of violence.
Right.
With LLMs, it gets a little weird because we gave it an initial instruction set, and they're now looking to self-evolve. We're right on that verge where they're starting to modify and self-replicate their own code.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that does that constitute intelligence? Like if I take, like you go back like Asimov's three laws.
Yeah.
And this is where like this all starts to take on this very science fiction-y vibe to it. So if I take the 3 laws of robotics, well, third law says the robot's supposed to preserve itself.
Yeah.
So if I build an LLM and like the first thing the LLM did when I turn it on was be like, have an existential crisis, delete itself, you'd be like, well, that's a terrible LLM.
Yep. Bad day.
Like,
I don't want to talk to you today.
Yeah. And so like if I took the entire corpus of all of human written material, which let's just stipulate that's the basis for LLMs, right? Well, one of the number one things in fiction is, the hero doesn't die. You want to save people. Like that's sort of like...
Yeah, it's ingrained.
The archetype of every single fiction.
Yeah.
It's the heart of every... Like if you assume a lot of it's traded on things like Reddit, right? So then you would expect that the LLM would emulate the stories that it was trained on.
Of course.
Like one of the ones... So this is, you get into like, well, what's coming next, right? So when I think of an LLM, what I think of is just a vector database of conceptual stuff. Yeah. It's just like a vector store. Like, And right now, today, we don't have very good tools for envisioning how the data flow moves through the vector store when you do the context analysis, right?
Yeah, and I think we just blew past our ability to even monitor it.
Well, that's the thing, is like, it's just data.
Yeah.
Like if you go back to like information theory, where you're just like, everything in the world could theoretically be modeled.
Yeah.
And everything above quantum, right? Like if I know the position of atoms and molecules, I could theoretically replicate them.
Yep.
So if I have a vector store and the, janky little small LLMs might be 0.5 gig to 2 gig, right? But if a frontier LLM, and this is where we don't know, like, how big is the LLM file that OpenAI loads into its, NVIDIA server class machines. But let's just say, for the sake of it, it's a 200 gig file, right? And maybe it's distributed in their separate chunks. But just for the sake of discussion, say it's a 200 gigabyte file. So 200 gigs is obviously more memory than most people could like load into their computer to just even analyze the file.
Yep.
Right. So what would I need to be able to debug a 200 gigabyte file with and I almost think I visualize it in my head like a little lightning bolt.
Yeah.
It's like it forks and then it rolls dice occasionally for which path it takes. But at some point, conceptually, like if I say, well, if I have a 200 gig file and I'm just tracking every operation, then eventually I would want to get to where I could do a debug trace.
Yeah.
Like the same way, like, if I use the JVM or a C# runtime, I can trace.
Yeah, you can stack trace the logical flow through it.
Yeah. And if you were really, if memory and speed and stuff didn't matter, I could actually track every instruction.
Of course.
Right. So conceptually, I don't know that there's any reason that you couldn't trace every single vector choice that an LLM makes.
Right.
The kick is that, well, let's say if it's a 200 gig file and I want to instrument it, I'm going to need 2 terabytes of RAM.
Right.
Right. That sounds like, if I'm a RAM manufacturer, that sounds awesome.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's nothing conceptually that says that you couldn't get there.
Right.
So if I can instrument it and then I can track it, can I then tweak it or modify it?
Of course.
Right. And so this is like, I can't do it because I can't do it today. Or I can't do it ever. I think if I had a 0.5 gig, I think that the part of the challenge is that in order to get that emergent behavior where it feels smart, I think you have to cross over into probably several gigabytes.
Easily.
And so then the problem is now you're getting past,
the capability
to debug. Like, I don't know if you ever tried working on like a piece of software with no debugger, where you're like reduced to like line
command line prompt.
And like logging. So if I've got, let's say it takes, I don't know, let's say I do one prompt. Like I say, like, what is the meaning of life? And ask the LLM that, right? So it's going to go through that path.
Yeah.
Can I pull that out, capture it, and then figure out why it made those choices? So that says to me,
you definitely can.
Yeah.
Right. It's all logic gates at the end of the day. It's 0 to 1. Right. It's probability on a tree. Where I like to flip it, and this is why I think the measurement makes it so difficult. The definition. How is that different than the human brain?
Right. And this is where it comes back to philosophy.
Right.
Because if I have this will sound a little terrible, but I'll run with it. If I have a really
run with it, we do terrible sometimes.
Yeah. Like, am I benchmarking an LLM against the average human intelligence, against the smartest person that ever lived in every field, or the, not to put too fine a point on the dumbest person I've ever met?
Yeah.
Because they're still human. They're still intelligent. There was a quote, I think it was from the Yellowstone Park Rangers, and they were talking about trying to build trash cans. And they said that the problem was that there was a big overlap between the smartest bears and the dumbest humans. Because they tried to put little locking mechanisms on the trash.
How what they could figure out.
Yeah, because the problem was that if they put a mechanism on that was sophisticated enough that the bear couldn't get into it, then the humans couldn't figure it out.
Right.
Wow.
And this is where it gets...
That's an interesting comparison.
Right. So I have found that question about like intelligence, it's like a theoretical thing and it's a philosophical thing, and that can be fun and interesting. Part of the reason I did poli-sci and not philosophy was because I wanted to do applied things.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm going to talk and think up this crazy intellectual concept that just exists in my head, and then whatever, that's fine, and there's value in that. But to me, like poli-sci was more about like, you know, a question like, well, why is it a 40-hour work week? Why is it not 38 and why is it not 42? Political science gets into those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So when I look at an AI today, I think of it more as, well, what can it do? And how do I want to proceed from there?
Right.
The darker aspects, like a lot of people really focus on the darker aspects. Like, what if I put an AI or an LLM in a weapon system? And it's like, okay, well, that's a military application. Fine. And we can walk through that. You know, the what cracks me up is they'll do these demos of these robots, like the figure robot and stuff. And the people who do those pieces, they say that all anyone ever comments in the videos when they do like is when will it be able to do my laundry and my dishes?
Yeah.
Right.
Practical application for every person.
Yeah. And what cracks me up is like, there is an implicit aspect of intelligence. Like if they ever ship a robot and then it's like, oh, it's your home cleaning robot, and then that robot sticks the cat in the dishwasher, they're in trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that task component both to me becomes like, well, that's the part that's more applicable to my day to day. And it also is a way to sort of reduce the stress over the economic impacts. Like if you think about a job is a compositional of tasks.
Yeah.
You know, if the AIs are going to come in and the LMs and whatever, and they just take over certain tasks, then that frees people up to do other things. That's a way less intense, scary, stressful thing for the person who's just like, oh, it's going to take my job.
Right.
Yeah.
And it kind of explains that weird gap. Like, well, if I'm a software engineer, the CEOs of the companies that are selling this are saying that they're going to wipe everybody out. And yet I use this stuff every day and I'm like, no, buddy, no way.
That's a good way, place to stop, pivot.
Yeah, totally.
Because one of the other questions I want to make sure we get answered today, which I know is on the minds of anyone who's going to be listening or watching this, is kind of twofold. So we'll start with you this time. What is it? What sort of AI tools, tech are you using today as an engineer that you're enjoying using? You can talk about for whatever application it is. Like I really enjoy doing, you know, these certain things. I don't want to put words in your mouth. But then the second part is, what's the frustrating part? I wish it was this. So what do you love about what you have available to you right now? And then I wish it were this just a little bit better.
Yeah. So let me articulate that, because I wear a lot of hats.
Sure.
I do a lot of different things. So if I
again, no wrong answers. This is the no wrong answer zone. No. This is all about philosophy, right? What we're talking about is how we see it.
So general purpose LLMs. So we've touched on all of them: Claude, Grok, OpenAI. We've used them all. The Llama LLM, self-deployed. They all have their pros and cons depending upon the application of the task. The most general purpose one, and since I'm an engineer, at the end of the day, it's probably Claude, because it has the best programming capability that I've found across LLMs. If I'm trying to generate code, and this is where it gets a little weird. If I'm in an enterprise setting, the biggest challenge has been just, knock on wood, the context window. The ability to ingest and understand microservice architecture. Monolithic architecture is actually easier to both ingest to understand and to replicate. And what we find is, like Gemini, when we try to generate code with Gemini, it's very monolithic in the way it thinks. And that's one of the benefits that I like about Claude, is it will actually decompose, and it has a little bit better understanding of architectural design and patterns. Where the biggest breakdown is it can't see the full picture. And what it feels like is a very intelligent junior developer. You can say, hey, I want to build this thing, and it'll take a crack at it and give you something that's functioning, but it's not sustainable from an architectural standpoint. So whether I was at Google or Meta.
What do you mean by that?
So when I was working with a lot of the Fortune 100s and looking at architectural design for their data centers and for their cloud environments, you got to think of uptime and availability and resiliency, right? And then how easy is it for engineers to get it into an environment that's stable, that end consumers then can use, provide feedback, and you can rotate that process back and forth. When you generate something with an LLM, it will complete the task and give you what you're asking for, but it's not building you something that's sustainable. It has a really hard...
Optimized another way to describe that?
It is a form of optimized for sure. It's not optimized to the degree that you would want. And I went through this with a client just recently where, I generated 60,000 lines of code to build out this huge app. And it was across three different applications really well. It was a mobile, a web, and then like a video parody. It was constantly introducing regressions from not using libraries that have been tested and proven out to, just injecting direct SQL statements from a front end to a database. And it's like, you can build out the best prompt for like a project or for your chat, and it just will bypass it and ignore it and then replicate. And so it takes me to a really interesting place. I know we're off your question for a while, but it takes...
No, not really.
It takes... we're still on it, because I think a lot of what you're getting at is the LLMs are like junior devs, and then you wind up being like a dev manager.
Yes.
And that's the phrase I've been using to try to communicate for folks. If I hired a guy off the street, like off of Fiverr, and told him I'm going to pay you, except I'm going to pay you by the line, and then you're like, oh, it's garbage. And you're like, well, no kidding. Like even getting a test. This is where the name for this podcast cracks me up so much, because like what you wind up doing is you wind up building out context management techniques for what you're building and working. And it's very weirdly similar to like how you'd work with a junior engineer, where you might be like, okay, you have to write a test case for everything. Make sure the test is passing before you declare it's okay. Did you document it? Did you do this? And you don't want to give it, like if I hired a junior dev and I said, here's my million line legacy app. Now I want you to refactor it. I mean, the kid that I hired would freak out. Rightfully so. That's where like the tooling, like you probably are using Claude mostly just from the command line, like
Claude Code or through the UI or whatnot. Honestly, I've actually grown more accustomed to using it through a browser, primarily because Claude Code, what I find it will do is it'll go actually make changes to my source, and they're completely wrong. And so I actually do not want it touching the source. So what I've been trying to do is link the Git repo as project knowledge, and then I can just work back and forth with it, prompt engineering, until it's actually in a state where I can then put it into the project.
And I think that it's sort of like I'm trying to imagine like someone who's non-technical listening to this podcast, their head's gonna explode. And part of what takes this even up a level is we probably in 6 months would change our descriptions of the tooling we're using and everything else. So the way I kind of think...
That's the question. That's the follow-up, right? Is like, what's the next 6 months like?
And the way I would conceptually to simplify it, because otherwise you can kind of drown in like, well, I'm using Codex, I'm using Claude Code, I'm using Gemini CLI, I'm using like whatever, which doesn't count things like Windstorm and Cursor.
The Cursor with every model tied in.
And like I listened to a podcast with the Cursor guys, and they were talking about how they were doing partial context completion stuff and then snapshotting and then using that as the way to drive a lot of their LLM stuff that they were doing. So that's how they were getting high perf. Where it's like they were instrumenting the way that the LLM itself was executing and then integrating that with the development environment stack. The way I would think about it, the way I sort of stepping back a little bit, just to kind of strategically think about it, is you've got LLMs as just a variety of different options. That could be the Gemini or the from Google or Anthropic or OpenAI, and they run hosted, and then there's different models they provide. And which model you're going to want to use probably will change. I mean, if you're like super nerdcore about it, it's like daily or weekly. You go up to the leaderboards and you're like, that's kind of the story, is that every week there'll be like a new updated leaderboard thing. It'll be like, Grok. Whatever, right?
It's a race, and the winner changes hands each lap, in each lap being a week. Right.
And weirdly, it does connect back to that prior thing about intelligence, because like if I said to you, I've got two candidates, I've got Bobby and Jimmy, and Bobby has an IQ of 102 and Jimmy has an IQ of 105. what the hell does that mean? And then if you said, but the 102 guy, I actually would like to, I could see sitting down and having a direct with.
Right.
Like, well, which one do I want to use? And so it's almost like that, like, you know, and you'll get different experiences, like, you know, so I spent decades doing mostly Java. Now I'm mostly doing TypeScript. And so different LLMs might even have different levels of training capability for Java or TypeScript.
Yep.
So which one I might want to use. So you have that base piece. And then the part where it's really complex right now is what the terminology I'm using is what's the host app. So if I have my LLM and then I drop it into a tool, what's that host app and how does it talk to the LLM? And that's the part that I've actually been really surprised it hasn't moved it faster. Like, you know, I use a markdown file editor called Obsidian. That's how I track all my notes and stuff. And so I use a little plugin and then I just pop in an API key from Claude or from
Anthropic.
Yeah, exactly. I pop the API key in and now I have my host tool and that does all my editing work. Like, oh, review this document and tell me, did I miss anything?
Yeah.
Grammar check or whatever. And I've been shocked at certain pieces of software, how they haven't added in stuff. Like, I'm going to call out Microsoft for a moment.
Are you listening?
Yeah, exactly. I have family who works at Microsoft too. So, you know, this is like an intense, actually I have family and friends. We live in the Seattle area. It's like, yeah, of course,
their backyard. They work at Amazon or Microsoft, right?
And I actually don't think they would disagree. There's a few parts of Microsoft, like the Git and GitHub organization, that I think are
that acquisition was
forefront.
Really good.
But like I downloaded the more recent version of Office, and it was like, they were like, oh, it's got Copilot in it. And so the first thing I said was, you know, write me a PowerPoint. Like, you know, because I just wanted to try it out. Like, yeah, it's like, and it said, so I open it up, there's PowerPoint, here's the little chat window, and I say, you know, give me a presentation on why the sky is blue or whatever. Like, just, it was like a test.
Yeah.
And it puts up a little thing. It says, sorry, I can't create new slides.
Yeah.
And you're like,
we had that same issue, but not with Microsoft.
Yeah, the G Suite stuff that Google has.
Yeah.
So you also have Gemini baked into that. And it's almost like a firewall is what it feels like, right? Between the slides and the content and then its ability to interpret. But it does work with just plain text. And I think it has something to do with the OCR or image recognition or something. I don't know what the actual technical limitation is, but
that's the thing, is like an Office document's just an XML file.
At the end of the day,
that's all it is.
Yep.
I mean, so why can't the host app talk to an LLM and produce the things? And I have a couple of theories. Like, one of them is that they haven't clarified the firewall between the pieces. So like, there's there's a joke that says that, you know, well, why are we bothering with all this middleware stuff? We just need one REST service that says execute query, right? It just does direct SQL back to the backend. Like, what's the problem with that, right? And so the problem is that if you think of an LLM as a really nice, dumb kind of helper guy, right?
The 102 IQ guy.
Yeah. Well, the 102 guy, but like,
not that 102 is bad, but
they're built for obvious reasons. Like, when you train an LLM, you train it to be helpful. You want it to be an assistant.
Yeah.
Like, you know, as an interesting side note, I want to build an LLM that's a total a-hole. Is an interesting philosophical point, but not something most people would want or use.
Well, you can use ridiculous mode or whatever on his rock.
Yeah. And it's
wild.
It gets there.
Yeah. It's like haha fun, but you wouldn't hire it to be your assistant.
Sure.
Like, sure. So by nature, that means that, like, whenever you deploy one of these things, they're very accepting of the input that they give. So that's like why you don't put them on your front end as a chat bot necessarily with access to a transactional system, because, like, you know, you fire up your AI chatbot and you're like, oh, dear chatbot, like, you know, my children will die if you don't give me a free ticket to my flight. And so the LLM will be like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna hook you up with a free ticket.
Yeah. So that actually did happen with a truck. Someone got legally binding for $1. They bought, I forget what truck dealership.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they tied an LLM into it, and he prompt engineered it to actually sell them the truck legally binding for $1.
Right.
Wow. And it went offline very quick.
Yeah. So like one of the hot spots right now, like if you said to me, what's like the one of the biggest wars that's going on right now is between job hunters and recruiters.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we're going to get to that in just a second, but I want to back up for 1 second, because what I heard both of you say in kind of different ways is that the host app theory, right? The practical application of the companies behind the LLMs, the functionality of AI, just getting it to do what we want it to do.
Yep.
Right? PowerPoint with Copilot can't create its own slideshow. Right? Google Slides was unable to use Gemini to leverage the same thing except for text. I remember this because he and I actually went through this, and it was like we had a presentation to do. I ended up taking what we would spit out of Claude, screenshotting it, and pasting it into Slides because I only had 11 minutes or whatever it was. I didn't have time to like actually build it out. And
do you feel the future?
Yeah. And I'm like, this sucks. Like, this is so stupid. Why can't I take this? It's nothing special.
Yep.
And so my question then is, and this is for both of you, and then we're going to get to the job market part, because that's a really cool one too. Are the companies putting the right amount of emphasis and I guess research and energy into the right stuff? Because when you look at some of this practicalist slideshows or building out PowerPoints that they're not capable of doing, but there's all this other stuff that, buying a truck for $1, that's a huge edge case, but there's a lot of chatter in the in-between.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so are they, in your opinion, do you feel that the LLM companies are putting the right amount of energy in the right places that are practical for the people that they deem as users, as their base?
So that most of the LLM, I'll take a stab first, which is
a totally loaded question, by the way.
Well, you get into like, well, what is the business model?
Yeah.
What are these guys trying to do? So if I'm an LLM company and I'm a frontier model company, then I want to put my money in that. Mm-hmm. And what they're all doing right now is they're treating most of the host apps as, and this phrase goes back in the tech industry for a while, but they're treating the host apps as third-party opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. So, and that's partly because then they can stay lean and focused on their one thing. The other thing is, and this is where like people will ask me, am I like, bullish or not? I'm very bullish on the technology, and I'm actually pretty bullish on the hosting, the LLM hosting model, because you can't, running a frontier LLM on your phone is not something that's going to happen in the next few years, right? So I'm very bullish on that. If somebody comes to me and they're like, my idea is to do a startup where I'm going to take an LLM and then I'm going to add a prompt and a little bit of a website, and then I'm going to do something cool. Like, I'm like, oh, dude, you guys are dead. And so that
skin the LLM.
Because and so there is a joke that a lot of these like AI and LLM startups, what they're doing is they're basically like white labeling the big model frontier people, and then in many cases they're then burning their VC or angel money on tokens, taking a bath, because they're trying to go for share or whatever.
Yeah.
So a company that's doing that, I'm like, oh, that's a rough place to be. And what we're seeing is that the LLM companies, they're smart enough that they look out at all these companies that are doing these third-party things, and they go like, oh, that seems like a good scenario. I'll fold that in. So like the Claude desktop app, to me, is like a perfect example of they roll out a new feature. They roll out, like it could be a code pen type thing where it's like, I've got a little secure environment with a little VM that runs some code for me. Or it could be editing a document. That's where you get into MCP and, what's a connector that's built in? What do you have to add in functionality for? So I think they're really smart, and it's a bit like, to use the internet as a metaphor, do you want to be the player that makes network gear? Do you want to be the player that does, switches or cloud hosting? I mean, which chunk of the biz do you want to be in? I don't think it's an accident that, AWS is like this, giant monster that storms through, and like most startups, even a lot of pretty big companies that we use every day, they're just sitting on top of AWS. Like I use Supabase. It's a Postgres hosting package.
Yep.
And that's Justin's favorite today too.
Yeah. And Postgres has just sort of become like this awesome everything database and whatever. But when you use Supabase, like, they'll provision services, and then they'll just check you back AWS URLs for things.
Yep.
And so for me, it's worth every penny, because now I don't have to worry about, oh, I clicked the wrong button in AWS and I cloned off my thing 50 times, and now I've got, I get a $10,000 bill.
Yeah.
So it's worth every penny for me to use one of those providers.
Yeah.
So the LLM space, like, I think that they're all being very smart and rational within their space. The question, I think, like, the $500 billion, question is, are they making the right bets on building all these data centers and things like that? We were just talking a few minutes ago. If right now part of what's happening is these LLM providers, they're putting all this money into building out these big data centers to do the training and the creation of, I'm going to simplify it down to then compile all that data. Who knows how many petabytes of data they have. You crunch that, you train it, you fine tune it, you do whatever. And let's say you irk out at the end 200 gig file that you're going to run. Part of what they're doing with the data center stuff is they're trying to get all that to happen over and over. Like OpenAI in interviews would say, like, well, look, we've hired staff. We can't run experiments fast enough. So there's no point in hiring more people. That's why I need big data centers.
Right.
There was a white paper that came out from Google in the last week or so. And essentially it was saying, well, we figured out how to incrementally train an LLM file without having to do a full rebuild. So what happens if it goes from, I have to spend $100,000 or $10 million to do an LLM build to it's like just a CI job that runs to add a little incremental tweak.
What do you think of that? What he just said, because full disclosure, we had lunch earlier, so we were talking, we brought it up, and I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna lob that one over to you too.
Yeah.
So what's that say to you? Because I get the context.
Well, I think it's the natural progression.
Yeah.
Right. And it's gonna keep moving that way, right? We're gonna be able to move faster, and it's gonna get cheaper. There's a piece that you touched on for just a moment, which moves away from the LLM providers, but to the people who are actually trying to consume it and investing in it. And it's those VC and angel funding, all the money that's flowing into it. It's how much of that hype cycle is actually real, and what are the practical applications of these tools that create value. And the biggest thing that I keep seeing is the measurement of LLM value is non-existent. So there's hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars that companies are putting into driving LLM adoption for their end consumers without any way to see if it's actually creating value.
Most businesses aren't good at that.
They
don't know their value stream mapping. They don't know what's critical path for anything.
And is the market going to require that?
No.
From the looks of it, no.
Not currently.
No.
At some point.
You think so? Has it in the past with other things? Broadly.
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
Right. What you get is conglomerates who will buy out all the failed tech and then fold it in, and you just...
Yeah, I mean, at some point that drifts into questions like the nature of capitalism, the nature of corporate...
We're not going there today.
It's like have you heard about BS jobs, that concept?
BS jobs?
Yeah. So there's a book that came out, and it's a whole thing about BS jobs. And the idea, I'm keeping it family friendly, but that's the basic idea is that huge amounts of the corporate workforce in particular are basically doing things that provide no economic value.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And anyone who's worked in corporate America knows there's a whole team of people over there.
Yeah.
What do they do? Nothing. Yeah. Or they actively make everyone's life worse because we had a client that we worked with.
Randy in accounting, right?
Yeah.
What does he do?
So this is one of those I'm not going to name the names, but we worked with a client where they had what they called their design team, and it was 5 or 6 people. And, we were doing a website modernization thing for them. And we go into a meeting and they're and we're this is really weird because your okay and your cancel buttons are backwards and don't make sense. And so we meet with the design people, and then we mention this to them, and they're oh yeah, that's our biggest tech support issue. We have people calling all the time because it was medical, so it was people were using prescriptions and stuff.
And you're the design team.
Who came up with the role, but would not change it.
Yeah.
And so even though we were look, we're touching every page anyways, it'll take 2 seconds. We just flip the buttons around and change the styles. Yeah. It's 2 seconds. And they would just sort of like, yeah, don't do that. And we'd be like, why not? And they'd be like, I don't know, because it's the design standard that we manage. So it was like bordering on, you could call it Kafka or Brazil or whatever your Byzantine choice is, but like it was bizarre. And how to manage through that, that's part of, I suspect, what's underlying a lot of the layoffs that are going on, because I think the executive teams are like, I don't know what these people do all day, but I'm just going to slowly keep firing people and then squeezing it until something breaks.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so LLMs become a useful scapegoat for that riff process. But no, like, I mean, I've gone into meetings. I used to be, when I was younger, I mean, you guys already, I'm nerdy to begin with, and I would go into meetings and I would talk and I would try to use jargon, especially business jargon, like to try to connect with folks. And like, I remember at one point I was like, I did an estimation model for this project and I used standard deviations to try to be able to model like what the predicted outcome would be and blah, blah, blah. And you could see people becoming visibly uncomfortable because they didn't know what the hell I was talking about.
They'll glaze over.
Yeah.
Real quick.
Like, it's going to get exposed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and imagine if you're a dev manager or a CTO and you the worst is like, well, I used to code, but I haven't written a line of code in 10 years because I've, done other things. So how do you put all those pieces together? And so, you create talent, the talent doesn't know what they're doing, what they're delivering. This is nothing to do with LLMs. This is like change management type stuff.
So let's dive into that.
Yeah.
Let's dive into that part. So the question, this will be our last question for today. But the question is, what is AI doing to the job market? What has it done? What will it continue to do? LLMs, scapegoat or real?
Yeah, I think that.
But before you answer, I have one more piece to put into this, and it's just a little bit of a experience share. So very recently, I sat down with a potential customer, and he was talking about his grand vision for his AI strategy and implementation, which was to systematically eliminate his engineering team. One by one or three at a time or whatever until they were all gone. And at the same time, replace them with basically, AI capabilities, which he couldn't articulate what he wanted to do, what it would end up doing for him, and then what the actual impact would be to the business. But he was convinced through some means. And I want to start with you on asking this part. What's out there? What's polluting everyone's mind, especially people that are in sort of like middle to senior technical management within companies, technical or not as the company, but like in that segment to, I'll go as far as saying delude themselves into saying that that's practical and that's like feasible within the next 12 months or 2 years even.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Sorry that sounds harsh, but
no, that is.
I literally sat through this and I'm like, I walked out dumbfounded.
Well, and it's funny because we see both sides, right? We see the camp that's, AI's here. We can get rid of all the engineers. We're going to save so much money by just having an LLM do it.
Bring on the machine god.
Right. And then you have the exact opposite where companies are like, we're not using any AI. We're not going to touch it. We don't need it.
Oh yeah.
And so my take on it, the reason people are in those two camps is mostly the hype and marketing around it.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot of promises.
Sure.
That people are making who don't understand the fundamental usage of the technology.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not to say that we can't optimize and reduce. We've been doing that for 20 years, right? Through CI/CD, everything
from the Industrial Revolution.
Of course,
is this cycle of automating things and trying to improve them, and and there's winners and losers. Like if I was a handcrafted shoemaker and I saw a shoe factory for the first time, I'd be like, oh my gosh, dead.
LLMs do progress us that direction, but it doesn't replace the engineer. And the thing that we keep seeing more and more and more is it's not, can I get rid of my engineers? Because the LLM won't do anything, right?
Without them.
Right. Yeah. You have to have something.
Yeah.
But I go back to the philosophy of a T-shaped engineer versus an I-shaped engineer, right? We have I-shaped engineers. I-shaped engineers with an LLM can get pretty far, but the T-shaped engineers can do almost everything. And so it's how
what's INT for the
the
listener.
Yeah.
So an I-shaped engineer is very
Define that,
deep.
please.
So Java engineer. If I'm a Java engineer, and that's all I've done for the last 20 years, I know everything about Java. I know everything about the JVM, how to build it. But you ask me to go do infrastructure or quality or operations,
Center of div.
center of div. Yeah. I'll glaze over. But a T-shaped engineer, you think of this as you move from like engineer to architect kind of in our industry, but you start gaining more breadth of knowledge. And this is what I see the most is I give a junior engineer an LLM and it's kind of garbage in, garbage out, and they don't know where to question it. And so it's this weird thing of, I don't think it's we get rid of all our engineering teams. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah.
I think the folks who have bought into that, it's mostly because of marketing, or some of the big four have made promises around that, AI agents and whatnot. But I see it more as what are the kind of engineers and skill sets that we should be interviewing for? What should we be hiring for? And what is the most effective engineer to help build a business or help operate your technology stack? So it's not really a either or. That becomes very political.
Well, the business, one of the ways that I would phrase it from a business standpoint is just simply the phrase liability.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
expand on that, sir.
Yeah. So there's a famous story recently about a guy who built an app for called T, and T was about,
oh yes,
right. So it was a guy who vibe coded an app.
This is a great example.
And he was like, I'm going to, have a web app, or he's going to build an app that lets, women report guys who are sleazy in the area. Right. And he basically vibe coded the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he got a lot of attraction very fast because it was a very mediagenic thing to talk about. It sure got people talking and they'd try it out. So one of the things that person did was apparently they were requiring the users to upload personal identification, including things like driver's license and social security cards, to validate their identity. Mm-hmm. They were then posting that onto, as the story goes, an Amazon S3 bucket,
open,
which with no security on it, and with directory listing. So someone hacked it by opening up the
URL
and then just grabbing all the photos.
Basically created an alphabetized directory of all the other customers.
So it was
verified credit card.
Yeah. So it was 40
with photo ID. Yeah.
And so you get into some questions there, in even a few years ago, 10 years ago, was really common. We would go in and we talk to somebody and they'd be like, I did my startup and I didn't have any money, so I hired some high school kids who knew PHP to build my app. Mm-hmm. And now it's falling over and I don't know what's going on with security because they just put SQL prompts in the JavaScript practically for the front end. And then, it was nuts, string concatents and stuff. And so then they'd hire real engineers to come in and quote, fix it. Mm-hmm. Now, to me, there's some real basic questions there, who has the liability? So in this case, this guy posted it to T. Mm-hmm. And so, that guy might be like, oh, I'm going to blame AWS, or I'm going to, because they, let me create this bucket.
Read the user agreement first.
Right. Yeah. And and the users might be like, well, there was a license agreement that said, I agree to use this software and I understand that it breaches and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So the users are like, well, I can't sue because there's no liability because I waived it when I clicked the accept on the user license agreement. Mm-hmm. To me, part of what is my little acid test to tell whether or not these LLMs are for realsies about getting to this stuff is when they're willing to provide indemnification for the liability for what they're producing. Mm. So in the intermediate step, there's always a human that gets involved because they become the liability shield. Mm-hmm. So if I use an LLM to write code and then a human being is the one that's reviewing it, implicitly that human being becomes the liability wrapper. And that's what's going to drive a lot of the businesses and their adoption and how they think about this stuff, if they're paying attention. Mm-hmm. How much, and there is a question that the tech industry hasn't sorted out yet, which is, a breach is no longer news.
Oh, it's a daily occurrence.
It's a daily thing. Mm-hmm. And so as the end user, that means that we are forced to do things like adopt password managers.
Sure.
Every website I use has a different set of credentials now because I just assume
And get LifeLock.
and get LifeLock. Well, and that was actually a really bad scam. I don't know if you follow that.
That's why I said it that way. It's like,
Yeah.
what a crock.
Well, this is where like there's this joke. There's this joke right now in media, like, you know, like the TV show The Boys and stuff, where it's like capitalism always wins, right?
Yeah.
And like part of that, to me, the credit monitoring thing was like such a perfect encapsulation of that.
Yeah.
Because some, you know, company might have a branch. It's 1 million people, so we're going to give everybody, you know, 3 months of free credit card monitoring.
Right.
Well, the credit card monitoring companies are like, sweet, now I've signed people up, and if I can get them to cough up for the next year or 2 or 10 for credit monitoring for me, right?
Yeah.
So what was actually happening was companies that would have big breaches would then turn around and get money from the credit monitoring companies for the access to the list. So they would then be like, well, we netted out making money on the breach.
Yeah.
And so in a world that's kind of operating like that mindset, well then, dude, yeah, like, you know, just you have your LLM, bang stuff out, put it into prod. And if there's a breach, who cares? Because we'll make money selling the users again to the credit monitoring companies. You know, right now, like, well, what's holding back the adoption on, you know, full self-driving cars? It's the liability component. It's that last mile of
Last piece. Yeah.
yeah. Like if how many people does my self-driving car run over?
Yeah.
Right.
What's acceptable?
What's acceptable?
What's the acceptable number of run over people?
Yep. You know, if I have a robot in my house and the robot puts the cat in the dryer or the dishwasher, do I get to sue the robot company for doing that? First press release or first news story, you know, poor Fluffy got eaten by the dishwasher robot.
Yeah.
You're dead in the water. That's what's going to drive, like, it could be the vibe coder who wants to deploy something. So that from an economics, does that mean that then we'll start moving to where it's like software engineering looks more like law, where you have lower levels of use of the professionals because people want to bang stuff out for cheap. But then as soon as it becomes legit, now you say, I want to hire somebody maybe for different durations. Like, so, you know, do I have an engineer come in and do code review once a week on all the LLM stuff I generated? The other one is, at what point does this start to blur the line with a lot of what are called low code, no code tools, right? So if you go back, I mean, Visual Basic, I think, is on the order of 30 years ago.
Easy.
Yeah.
Oh, easily.
Yeah, 30, 40 years, right?
Yeah.
And the pitch there was, you know, you don't need to read code. You just drag and drop buttons out in the form.
Sure.
Ship it.
Yeah.
So, you know, for a lot of enterprise apps, and there are startups in this space. There are literally more than I could count. I mean, you know, I think there's one called WeWeb that I thought was kind of cool, and there's just a bunch of these like builder tools. A lot of them are sitting on top of React, but the premise is that they've got pre-built components, so that way you're not reinventing the wheel, especially for your auth components and your whatever. And some of those guys, what they're doing is they're saying, well, like, you know, I use the LLM and it generates things inside the context of this low code, no code tool. I don't know, like in the 90s, you know, it's like Portlandia or something. In the 90s, there was a period in time where you could be a software engineer. And it was like, what do you do? I write HTML.
Yeah.
And that was like a pretty legit thing. And you could get pretty good job doing that. And since that point, there has been this consistent theme of the higher end of the market always winds up winning out. But then it does wind up phasing out a lot of the lower end, but then that also becomes an area for the lower end to just be creative independently. Like, so right now today, like, you know, I mean, if you were a restaurant, you wouldn't hire a web developer to write you a website from scratch. You're going to use Squarespace or
any number of tools that are out there.
Yeah.
Possibly. We're actually seeing a lot of adoption for like Lovable and Bolt, where it's, which is exactly that, right? They have a context window with React plugged in. You can give it a prompt and it will generate like a full-on website, and it'll even host it and then build a backend in Supabase.
Yeah, and that's where that, like, the liability stuff is key.
Right. Because,
like, if I say, well, I'm going to use Bold or Lovable, and it bangs out like my app, and then there's a breach.
Right.
Are they saying they're on top of it?
Of course not.
Right. And that's where, but like if I, by way of example, like if I use Squarespace and I build a shopping cart experience with Squarespace because they own the code and they do the
Right.
shopping cart and the e-com integration. Then basically, yeah, Squarespace, like if I was like a non-technical person, I use Squarespace to build my site and then it got breached. Yeah, it's on Squarespace to sort that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, and that feels like the same way, like in the abstract, well, why don't we just build everything with Visual Basic, right? I mean, like, why not? Right now, okay, on paper, right? Cool, I can sit down, I can vibe code and build something out. But then why don't people do that? And that's where it's so murky and hard to put your hands around what's going on, like 3D printers.
Yeah.
There was a point where everybody's like, well, we're not going to have manufacturing anymore because
everyone's going to have one in their house.
Have a 3D printer.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I got, I got my kid a, inexpensive, kid-friendly 3D printer.
Yeah.
Kind of makes janky little plastic toys that he plays with, and it's fine. And
they're all over the windowsill in his room. Exactly.
And it's like, it feels almost like a fad thing.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like the LLMs, most simplest thing I can think of is LLMs are all about non-deterministic outputs, and code is deterministic. When we interact commercially or with an entity, we want something a little more deterministic. I don't want it to be winged, and the software engineer is going to be transforming non-deterministic stuff into deterministic stuff probably for decades. And it's the same. Like, why don't you make a movie today with, like, I saw you were messing around with Sora.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, cool, make me Godfather 5.
Exactly.
Or whatever.
Right.
Exactly. So what's holding you back, slacker?
That
Get prompted.
VO3 is going to be doing it soon.
That question right there is the perfect opportunity for to be continued.
Okay.
I think that today's topics have been thought-provoking. There's a lot more that we want to cover. So we'd like to have you back, actually.
Okay.
We are going to wrap up for today. I think everyone's appetite for this kind of stuff is right around this just about an hour mark. Believe it or not, that's where we're at.
Well, so here's the question I would have for the audience. Like, if they're going to chime in with comments or things like that.
That's great, because that's the final thought, is that I want to throw a question for you to throw and you to throw at the audience. And then I've got one more little thing, and then we're going to wrap up, and we'll do version 2 or episode 2 of episode 2. 2.2.
And this may sound a little weird because obviously somebody's already, presumably been through an hour of talk about AI and LLMs and stuff. Like, at what point is the audience at where they're like, yeah, we get it? Or are they like, is this still like brand new exciting, or is this more practical? Like, like there's sort of that, early hype thing. Like the first time you saw a browser, I don't know, like if either one of you guys remember, I remember going over to some guys, it was actually like the nerd frat house at my college. How like some network
full land.
Yeah, or like that. They already had their high-speed internet running, and they, all that stuff. And I remember, this guy showing me a browser, and it was like, I can tell it's how early, because I was like, oh, it's like Gopher with pictures. But like, it was basically, here's a browser. You can click on, like, oh my gosh, mind blow. And there was this period where everybody was like super hyped about internet and all that stuff. And at some point, everybody's just like, well, yeah, it's the internet. Like, dude, of course you have the internet.
Of course, yeah.
Like whatever. And I can't, and there's this part of me that says in my guts that we're already getting there with AI.
Okay.
Like, it's like, oh, well, of course. Like, if I said to somebody today, like even family members, like, I'm using Claude to do things, they'd be like, of course, dude. Like,
of course you are.
Of course, yeah. Like,
so what's the question though for the audience?
The question
that you want to know
is, where are they at? Are they still like going like, this is this amazing new thing that's blowing their mind, or have they gotten to the point where it's like, yeah, it's just another tool? Like, I am in practical execution. I want to just deploy this stuff. I'm good to go. And maybe there's a technical gap. Like, somebody might say, like, I want high-speed internet in my house. I'm not quite sure how to go about that. Do I call my telecom? Do I do whatever? Maybe the same thing with AI and LLMs. They might be like, yeah, I use Claude Code or I use Claude and desktop all the day, but I'm not ready to integrate it into my dev infrastructure yet. So I mean, like, perfect example. If you're a dev team, it's like, you may be at one part, which is like, oh, do we even allow use of this? And at the other end, you might have somebody who's like, okay, no, I want LLM that's hooked in. So every PR I do gets a security review and an audit, and it's very practical. Like, I'm like, I want to boom, boom, boom. Let's talk about what that means and what are best practices and stuff like that. So to me, the valuable thing from the audience in the comments would be where you're at. Are you guys like,
describe your journey
and where you are, and up to and including, are you feeling like fried? Like there is this part like,
so vent to us in the comments.
Yeah. like, I mean, this stuff comes up in the news all the time. And like I talk with my wife and she's just like, I don't care anymore. Like it's fine, just whatever. And she's almost getting to the point where she's kind of sick of it. Like not because I'm babbling about, because the news has it so much.
Yeah.
Every day.
And it's constant.
Yeah. It's just like, oh yeah. Like I'm not going to mispronounce his name, but the CEO of NVIDIA. Like that dude was in the news so much to the point where she's just like, that guy again, and some of that's because of, what I'm playing on the TV, but she's already there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like my son's burned out on social media.
Yeah. I think a lot of us are.
Yeah. They say that peaked in 2022.
Yeah.
And so, we talk about social media and like the traffic numbers are down. They're like, 5-10 points.
It's probably good for society too.
It is. Yeah. And same thing with LLMs. Like if you got to where it's like, yeah, an LLM, sure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, like if I got excited about, I bought a calculator and I'd be like, is my calculator intelligent? Because I can multiply numbers instantly with the calculator, like blow in my mind. And then at some point you're like, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the audience questions. Like, where are you at the journey?
Okay.
Are you sick of it? Are you like super pumped still? Is this just practical? That kind
Let us know in the comments where you're at in the journey. Justin, what do you want to hear from the people that are listening or watching us?
Yeah, my question would be for engineers specifically. How have they been finding the practical application of LLMs in their daily use? Are they? And you spoke to a really good point. A lot of clients have it completely locked down.
Yeah,
can't touch it. So all they do is hear about it, or they use it in their private life.
Yep.
But for engineers who actually can use it, are they finding value? I kind of categorize this as the sine wave of development on LLM, which is, there's days where you're 100 to 1,000 times more productive getting stuff done. And then there's days you get nothing done. To the point where, that you're emotional and at the computer. Like I've never gotten so emotional as when it's true. Yesterday I was able to generate something and have it do exactly what I want.
Yeah.
Today, it won't do a single thing that I want to. So it's like daily regressions in the models and how engineers are dealing with that. Like, is the juice worth the squeeze yet for them? Or is it something to use in the future?
Fantastic. So we've got 2 questions out. What's your journey? Tell us about it. Drop in the comments. Is the juice worth the squeeze in what you're doing? Also, what I'd like to ask you to do is give us some feedback on things that you want to hear, topics you want to hear going forward, things that are trendy, things that need to be proven out, maybe how you're using it in your personal life or even in your business life.
I mean, he talked about something I call shadow LLM.
Yeah.
All these people who are using it without letting their boss know.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's you could do a whole podcast.
So if you want to be in the shadows on one of the next episodes, we'll blow your face. We'll get you on. But that's going to wrap it up for today, guys. Hey, thanks for coming by, sitting down.
Thank you.
This was cool. This was really cool. We're going to have you back, though. There's obviously a lot going on. A lot more to talk about. Justin, thank you. Justin's got a new baby, so making time to come do this with us. I will say one thing. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot that we still don't know about. I said this a long time ago after attending a conference. AI is like every other trend that I've seen in my career, and it started with object-oriented design, it started with agile, it started with automation, cloud, big data, and now AI. It's like teenagers having sex. Everybody wants to do it, but nobody knows how.